Simmons, his best highlight of the year, his only highlight of the year, taking it out on a little Knicks fan.
It's fitting that it was a Knicks fan. That's how the season's gone for the Knicks, right?
They ended it with a win, which is actually a loss. But we should not talk about the 76ers and their season nor Ben Simmons because they are far from the postseason. Meanwhile, 16 teams are in. Of course, Rohan Nadkarni here to talk about it with us. The NBA playoffs begin this Saturday. What's the best first-round matchup in your opinion, Rohan?
I think you have to go Rockets Thunder for this one. I mean, you got the two maybe MVP favorites, although I don't know if that's how it's going to shake out. But yeah, just two great individual players right there in Russell Westbrook and James Harden. And I think it should be a fairly entertaining series. I mean, the Rockets and Thunder played 4 times during the regular season. 3 of those games were decided by 3 points or less. So I think it'll be a close matchup. And seeing those guys, hopefully maybe they're guarding each other in the fourth quarter, something like that. You want to see Westbrook and Harden go head-to-head.
How much of that series, Rohan, is going to be about the individual matchup that you talked about, Westbrook and Harden, and how much is actually going to be about Houston versus Oklahoma City?
Well, I think when it comes down to who's going to win these games, it'll be more about the role players, right? And I think what gives Houston the great advantage there is the pieces they have around James Harden fit so much better than the pieces Oklahoma City has around Russell Westbrook. Guys like Ryan Anderson, Eric Gordon, they're primed for big series. If they shoot the lights out of the ball, it could be an easy win for Houston. So I think it'll come down to the rosters ultimately, but Russ and James obviously will have a huge factor in the fourth quarters.
Yeah, especially if they're guarding each other
that would
in
be
the
fun,
fourth
right?
quarter. I mean,
down the stretch, fourth quarter of a game 6 or 7, one-on-one there.
Let's be honest, defense hasn't really been a huge part of their success this season, but it could be in the playoffs. Okay, so the Oklahoma City Thunder, they're obviously a 6 seed. Which 6 seed or even lower do you think has the best chance to pull off an upset?
So I just want to say I don't know if any of these teams have a great chance to pull off an upset. 2 teams I'm looking at would have to be the Grizzlies on the west side, the Bucks in the Eastern Conference. I think a lot of people will pick Milwaukee to beat Toronto. Toronto, for whatever reason, is always a talented team that struggles in the playoffs. They usually lose the first game of the playoffs every year. So, but I believe in Toronto this year. I think they have a loaded roster. So I'm looking to Toronto to play well. But the Bucks will have a chance, mostly because of Giannis. And he's been spectacular this season. The Grizzlies, the Spurs have kind of had their number the last couple years, but if the Spurs are playing Pau Gasol and David Lee, heavy minutes, I think that works in Memphis' favor. They can play Zach Randolph and Marc Gasol together. It'll be fun to see the Gasol brothers square off. So I think those are 2 matchups I have my eye on, but I'm not confident in either one.
You like the Grizzlies more, or do you think that the Spurs may be vulnerable? I'm kind of trying to follow your thinking on that one.
To me, it comes down to matchups. I think Memphis has an opportunity to match up well with San Antonio if the Spurs are committed to playing big. They have some slow-footed big men on defense. Frankly, Pau Gasol isn't what he used to be on defense. David Lee's never been a great defender. LaMarcus Aldridge is a big guy. So I think the matchups there kind of help Memphis in terms of maybe they can play a style of ball that they're more comfortable with. Those guys who've been together for so long, Tony Allen, Mike Conley, Marc Gasol, Zach Randolph, if they're all on the court together, I think they have a chance.
We've been waiting for Memphis to break through. Expect a lot of games around the 75, 74.
A lot of 89, 84 games.
Yeah, ugly, grinded out playoff basketball that we've seen. We've talked about some of the intriguing matchups. How about an intriguing player in the first round of these playoffs?
So someone who I have my eye on right now has got to be Paul George. He's having his best offensive season of his career. The year before he broke his leg, people were talking about him as an MVP candidate for half that year. He's been better this year than he was that year. LeBron seems to bring out the best in Paul George, whether it's in the regular season or the playoffs. Cleveland's defense will keep the Pacers in a lot of these games. I expect Cleveland to win that series, but I think Paul George can really go off, and I think this will be his series to kind of put him back on the map. He hasn't been really talked about as one of the best players in his conference this year, so that's gone to like Jimmy Butler, Giannis. But Paul George has been spectacular, and I think this series will kind of remind some people of that.
What about Giannis? I mean, to the seasoned NBA fan, we know how spectacular he is. What is he going to show the more broad audience now with the Bucks in the playoffs?
Well, I think what he'll show is just how well-rounded of a player he is. I mean, he's not someone who shoots the ball particularly well, but he can just do everything else. I mean, his length, his athleticism allows him to get into the paint whenever he wants. He can be a terror defensively, especially in transition. I mean, chase down blocks. He just does so much for that Bucks team. And we talked about it, top 20 in 5 different statistical categories. What really helps the Bucks also is having Chris Middleton back. He helps stretch the floor for Giannis a little bit. So he's just a spectacular all-around player.
As excited as I am for the guard play, I'm actually excited to see some of these big men too. With Giannis, also Rudy Gobert, we get some really fun front courts. Except for that Memphis-San Antonio.
Yeah, right.
It's going to be not so fun. Of course, Russell Westbrook and James Harden had spectacular, record-breaking seasons, but not for all the right reasons. Watch this.
James Harden and Russell Westbrook have absolutely toasted the league this year, but they've also been cooking up something special: turnovers. This season, Harden and Westbrook have obliterated every record for coughing up the ball. Take turnovers per game, where their closest competitor is more than a full turnover behind. Heck, only 20 players average more assists than Harden does turnovers. And even though they both rank in the top 3 in assists per game, neither is in the top 90 in assist to turnover ratio. Looking at sheer volume, they've got almost 100 more than the next guy on the all-time turnover list. But Westbrook and Harden boast all-time high usage rates, so the giveaways must be collateral damage, right? Not exactly. During Kobe Bryant's 05-06 season, he lost the ball only 3.1 times per game. So what's the impact on their teams? OKC and Houston sit in the bottom 6 in team turnovers. Westbrook is responsible for 36% of Thunder turnovers, while Harden is to blame for 38% of the Rockets. So which one of these two is MVP again?
They can turn it over all they want. I am excited to watch that matchup, Maggie.
A lot of turnovers.
Yeah, it's going to be a lot of fun. The first round of the NBA playoffs, of course, tips off on Saturday. So to get you ready, we've come up with our list of the top 5 first-round series of all time. And we start with number 5, which is a best-of-5 back in '95. Houston came in as the defending champs to take on the Jazz as a 6th seed. The Rockets trailed this series 2-1, but Hakeem Olajuwon was not to be denied. 40 points in Game 4, 35 points per game in the series as Houston came all the way back to beat the Jazz in 5 games and go on to win their 2nd straight NBA title.
Michael Jordan playing baseball at the time. Number 4, despite Kobe's best effort, including a buzzer-beating game winner in overtime of Game 4, which led to this iconic moment.
Bryant for the win. Bang!
Well, Kobe had heart, but the Phoenix Suns had the next 3 wins. They won Game 7 by 31 points, becoming the 8th team in history to come back from a 3-1 deficit, partly because Kobe took only 3 shots in the second half of Game 7. Not much heart in that one.
No, a little bit of a protest at the end of that one. One of the tightest series in NBA history took place during the first round back in 2009. The Celtics and Bulls went back and forth, setting an NBA record with 4 overtime games, including a triple overtime thriller in Game 6.
It's Pierce. Salmons fights through a screen. No one knocked it away. Galloping with Pierce.
Joakim Noah and the Bulls took Game 6, but it was Boston who took Game 7 and the series that featured 5 of the 7 games being decided, Maggie, by a single basket.
Yeah, you saw Doc Rivers there just looking physically ill on the sideline after that Noah dunk. Number 2, well, it's the OG, the first ever 1-8 upset. The 63-win Supersonics were dismissed by a Denver Nuggets team, Ryan, that barely had a winning record. Gary Payton and Sean Kemp were stunned, while Dikembe Mutombo was overjoyed.
That's it. Mutombo embraces the ball and the unlikely upset. One of the great upsets in NBA playoff history.
It's the start of Dikembe's
Yeah,
not
maybe.
in my house, right?
I don't know. Did that start back in Georgetown? I don't know.
And our number 1 first-round series of all time was back in 2007. The top-seeded Mavericks had won 67 games during the regular season, but the 8th-seeded Warriors gave Dirk and company fits. Baron Davis averaged 25 points per game for the series as Golden State become the first 8th seed in NBA history to defeat a top seed in a best-of-7 series.
And Marv, while we're talking about the Warriors, we got to look ahead because they may not be done. So they're going to face the winner of Utah and Houston. As you see Nelly and Sharon sharing a laugh.
Unfortunately, they were done after that.
Yeah, it didn't last
after
too
that
long.
win, but it was a fantastic first-round upset.
Historic first round for the Warriors.
Yeah. The Cleveland Cavaliers begin their title defense when the NBA playoffs begin Saturday. A new book takes a look back at LeBron's return to Cleveland with new details about how the reigning NBA champs came together. The The book is called The Return of the King. It's written by Brian Windhorst and Dave McMenamin. And Brian Windhorst joins me now. Thanks so much and congratulations on this book.
Thank you. I appreciate it a great deal.
We're going to get to the book in just a moment, but I'd love to know, looking at the Cavaliers right now, what are some of the red flags that you are seeing as they start the playoffs?
Well, they're a terrible defensive team.
That's true.
If they win the championship with this defense, they will make history because they have terrible defensive habits and their rankings are very, very low. Having said that, they have the most dominating player the East has seen since Michael Jordan. He's won 18 consecutive series in the Eastern Conference. I mean, that's incredible. He's won 25 consecutive series where he's won at least one road game. Not even Michael Jordan did that. So to tell LeBron, boy, you guys are really limping into the playoffs, you're really struggling, I don't know if this is going to work out, you may not have the #1 seed, how are you supposed to scare him? You're not going to scare him. And that team came back from 3-1 down. So I agree that they are vulnerable. And I would make the argument maybe this is the most vulnerable LeBron has been since his first time around in Cleveland. And if you're Boston or Toronto, you may be saying, just give us a chance. But when you look at the Cavs themselves, I still think they have confidence.
How would you describe the chemistry between the team now, specifically LeBron and Kevin Love and LeBron and Kyrie Irving?
I think LeBron and Kyrie are in a good place. I think they have each other's backs. Doesn't mean that in moments they won't irritate each other. There was a game a couple of weeks ago with the Pacers where the Cavs actually won. Paul George and LeBron both had 40 points. But he got into a screaming match with Tristan Thompson. And being in the locker room after that game, it was like a loss. They were so down. Kyrie bolted without talking to us in the media. And it was like, But I think in general, LeBron and Kyrie have worked a good relationship. I think they're solid. And they had a lot of fun in the playoffs last year. I don't think they're having a lot of fun right now.
Well, it's funny because you mentioned that when they weren't having a lot of fun, when the wins felt like losses after the fact, that really led to the firing of David Blatt, despite the fact that the Cavs had the #1 seed and had the best record, rather, in the NBA at the time.
You know your Cavs.
If this joylessness continues, is that what makes them the most vulnerable as you see it?
One of the things that you see in the NBA all the time is things change very quickly. Teams are on hot streaks and they go south. Teams are sort of shaky and they go north. It happens all the time, and we know this team has it. So I'm still really willing to give them time to figure it out.
There is another book out that's profiling the rise of Steph Curry. Marcus Thompson has written the book, and in it he says that LeBron James and some other superstars really showed, the word is disdain, for Steph Curry because of his meteoric rise and all the hype around him. You know James better than anyone. How does he feel about Curry?
I have not seen that. Now, Marcus is around Steph, and maybe that's how Steph perceives it. Marcus is an excellent writer. My viewpoint of LeBron and Steph, LeBron does not see Steph as a rival. Now, maybe that's an argument point. Maybe Steph fans will be upset about that. The last peer LeBron thought he had in the league was Kobe. And now when he compares himself to somebody, he's comparing himself to Jordan. In 5 years, will he feel differently about that? It's possible. Also, there's an undertone there with LeBron and Steph and Carmelo and Steph and Chris Paul and Steph. And that is that they are Nike guys and Steph is Under Armour. And that is the layer that goes over the top of everything. And it really matters to these guys. And Steph left Nike, which is a whole thing, and Under Armour is a rising brand. And last year, yes, it was Warriors versus Cavs. That's what we were all watching. But it was also on Nike versus Under Armour. There were Nike executives in the Cavs locker room celebrating after the Cavs won. That was viewed as a victory for Nike. And when Durant went there, Nike flooded the market with advertising and money to try to, knock down Curry. So yes, I can't, say how Steph feels about it, but there is a corporate element in addition to other elements as well.
Game within the game, so to speak.
Always.
LeBron called going back to Cleveland a legacy play. He's obviously won a title now for the city. He says that he's chasing the ghost of Michael Jordan. But from what you can see, where is his motivation coming from now that he's already delivered the title?
Yeah, that's a big point. I think the reason LeBron went to the Jordan stuff, which I think is dangerous, is because I do think he has completed what he was set out to do, which is to deliver a championship to Cleveland. Now, I don't think LeBron has to do anything else to be an all-time great. I think he's cemented it. But I think going after Jordan is what he's using as his motivation. There's also one more thing. His son is 13 years old. LeBron is 32. So many things have to go right for a player to make the NBA. But his son has the profile of a kid who can make the NBA, and that would be 6 years from now. Could LeBron and his son play in the NBA at the same time? It's never happened. Ken Griffey Jr. type thing. That would be a driving element for him to stay competitive, to stay in good health and everything like that. And also to make sure his son stays on the path so that he could maybe enter the league when he's 19.
That would be phenomenal. I'm sure general managers would be licking their chops and front office executives would absolutely love that. There's so much detail in this book. If there's one or two things that you can pick out that you learned while researching it that completely blew you away, what are they?
Well, there's an email in there that David Griffin wrote, the general manager wrote, the day the Cavs went down 3-1, which I could only compare it to a Jerry Maguire type email.
Who's coming with me?
In the middle of the night, he basically wrote this manifesto about how they were destined to still win. And it was very surprising because Griffin is not a rah-rah type of guy. He's not one to come in and say, win one for the Gipper. And he sent it out to the whole company, just like Jerry Maguire did. And people were waking up in the morning going, somebody needs to check on Griff, you know? But that's printed in there, and it's amazing to read because that's like sort of a time capsule of what was actually going on.
Yeah, a lot of all caps going on in that long email, which sort of harkens back a little bit to a famous Dan Gilbert email that was sent a long ago. Not Comic Sans, though.
I think we're running that excerpt on SDI.com with the email within it. So
another one is when they're on the private jet from Las Vegas to Miami. And Lee Jenkins had already filed his first draft of the I'm Coming Home speech. I think it's the most trafficked day in SI.com history, the day that letter landed. But Dwayne Wade's on the plane.
Yep.
Dwayne has no idea that LeBron is about to leave him and go to Cleveland. And were they really making edits on the story while Wade is sitting there, presumably across the aisle?
Yeah, Lee is part of this book. He's interviewed for the book. And Lee had delivered his first draft of LeBron's essay as they began to leave on the plane. So Lee knew, and Dwayne, who's one of LeBron's closest friends, and teammates. And that's the thing important. It's one thing if your friend is going to know what you're going to do professionally, but it has impacted Dwayne's his team, and he was a free agent too. It impacted, his money. And so one of the things I had to find out was, why did you not tell him? Why did Lee Jenkins know before one of your best friends? And that's, they gave an answer that I thought was acceptable the more I thought about it, but it was not an answer that I would have thought they would have given.
Brian, congratulations on the book, Return of the King. You wrote it with Dave McMenamin. Really appreciate your time and really some incredible reporting going on in this
Yes, thank you. I appreciate it a lot.
Yeah, not to spoil everything in the book, Ryan, but LeBron and his team didn't want to put a burden on Dwayne Wade. For him to know that information, he would feel like he would have to go tell Pat Riley in the Heat. Doesn't he have an obligation to do that?
Yeah, you would think. It would be fascinating behind-the-scenes look at what was going down when LeBron was making that return.
Yeah, fantastic. Have you seen the Chicago Cubs World Series rings? They were given out last night.
I have. This is some serious bling, Maggie.
Yeah.
My goodness.
Very
look at
impressive.
That.
A couple of details here. Of course, they're giving out 1,908 individual rings, a nod to 1908. 108 stones to represent the 108-year title drought. And, of course, the We Never Quit engraved and a goat, Ryan.
Love
they
it.
went there.
Yeah, look at the scores of the game, the goat on the inside. This is solid. Hey, the longer the drought, the more the stones, I guess. Like,
that makes it worth it.
How do you fit 108 stones on your finger, Maggie? You
would
would know more about this than me, but...
You find a way, Ryan.
Yeah.
However you can get him on there.
Point.
The ring the size of a satellite dish. Yesterday, of course, I caught up with a lifelong Cubs fan. And when I say lifelong, I mean 91 years. Wait until you see how sharp Hall of Fame coach Marv Levy is. Ryan, I could not believe it. We should all be so lucky to be that sharp at 91. You're going to be incredibly impressed. I spoke to the coach yesterday. As the Cubs embark on defending their World Series title, one coaching legend has written a new children's book recounting the Cubs' historic run. Hall of Fame coach and Chicago native Marv Levy has penned the new book, Go Cubs Go, Baseball's Never Give Up Story. It's illustrated by Rob Peters, and the great Marv Levy joins us now. Coach, you've been a longtime Cubs fan, a long-suffering Cubs fan, so what did their World Series win mean to you?
Well, it was exciting. It was a great time here in Chicago. I had been saying for many years that if the Cubs ever win the World Series, this will be the greatest day in Chicago sports history. And it sure was. The celebration was magnificent. They reported that there were 5 million people, I think that's an exaggeration, to celebrate the day after down in Grant Park.
Coach, we know that you were honored by the team during the World Series. I believe it was Game 3. What was that experience like?
I know many people in the Cubs organization very well. Hall of Famer Ryne Sandberg is a good friend of he and his wife Margaret, of my wife and me. We were very good friends of Harry Carey, their iconic announcer. And so we knew fans of the organization. They invited me back for their the third game of the World Series, because every game, the Cubs honor a former service veteran. I was a World War II veteran, home on furlough. The war had just ended. The last time the Cubs were in the World Series, 71 years earlier, back in 1945. And I got to see the 7th game of that World Series. The Cubs lost, all the fans walking out saying, well, wait till next year. Well, they said that for 71 more years. And finally, 108 years after they had last won a World Series, they came through this year. Quite an exciting time.
Oh, absolutely. What do you remember from that Game 7 that you watched as you had just gotten home from the war?
Well, I remember that I was home on furlough with a friend of mine. We were watching game number 6 of the World Series, or not watching. We were listening on radio. There was no television. Listening to game number 6 on the radio. The Cubs won it. He and I sprinted over to Wrigley Field, hoping to get tickets. The line was out of sight. We lined up anyway. They moved everybody in uniform up to the front. We were able to buy a ticket. Back then, it cost $1.10. Wow. But I remember the Cubs lost. That I do remember.
Unfortunately, but they made up for it in 2016 by winning it all. The book is called Go Cubs Go. I want to ask you about the Buffalo Bills, of course, the team you coached to 4 Super Bowls, unprecedented. Why haven't they found the type of success they had when you were the coach?
A lot of the times it's turnover. I think you stick with somebody. You go through some tough times. If you want to build a championship team, start with defense. Offense sells tickets. Kicking wins games. Defense wins championships. Once you do that, your quarterback can function. He's not always playing catch-up. He's not predictable. He's not going to get blitzed and sacked and take big chances and throw interceptions. He's going to start to get better and better.
That's fantastic advice. How does it feel for you to watch the Bills now?
Well, I enjoy football. I always did. I go back for a game or two every year. We always have a reunion. One of our former players may go up on the Wall of Fame, or they will celebrate his induction into the Pro Football Hall of Fame. Many alumni events there. The people in Buffalo were they were fantastic football fans. They're tremendously supportive of us. Even when we lose those Super Bowl games, they were part of the reason where we were able to fight our way back in the tremendous support we had. So I keep pulling for the Buffalo Bills for more reasons just than I was once the coach there.
Yeah, have you learned anything from being a lifelong Cubs fan that you could tell a lifelong Bills fan?
Well, that's right on the cover of the book. Never give up. Never give up. Persist. That's right. Go Cubs, go.
Coach, obviously, I'm assuming you watched the Super Bowl, this recent one. What message would you have for a team and a fan base like the Falcons after suffering the worst collapse in Super Bowl history?
Well, it's probably the same one that I just referred to when I'm talking about that Go Cubs Go book. Never give up. Bounce back. Mourn for a little while, but don't just lie there in the fetal position and whimper. I can remember after our first Super Bowl loss to the New York Giants, on the way home, I remembered a little 4-line poem. Fight on, my men, Sir Andrew said. A little I'm hurt, but not yet slain. I'll just lie down and bleed a while, and then I'll rise and fight again. And that was a poem I posted on the bulletin board for our players, and it was the mantra they followed. And it's what I'd suggest right now to those, even to in Atlanta. Yes, crushingly disappointing, mourn for a while, but get up and fight again.
Wow, pearls of wisdom there that I'm sure they would appreciate, especially hearing from you, the great Marv Levy. Of course, we know you were busy writing this book called Go Cubs Go, and for people who think it's just a children's book, it is a great children's book, but it also has a sort of timeline of the entire Cubs organization and a glossary of baseball terms. It's really great for adults as well. I'm sure a lot of parents will appreciate that, Marv, as they're reading their kids to sleep at night, whether it's in Chicago or elsewhere. Such a pleasure to talk with you, Hall of Fame coach Marv Levy. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Maggie. My pleasure, too.
I'm floored even watching this back.
Amazing.
I couldn't stop talking about it yesterday. He is 91. I wish he could coach the Bills right now.
Amazing. Sharp as attack. I know that was a special interview for you personally,
I know.
Maggie.
I didn't tell him. I didn't tell him I was such a big Bills fan. I felt like it would be a little weird. We were on Skype, and I didn't want to.
Very, very cool.
Didn't want to
Hey,
tell him about that. But he's like an idol of mine.
if I can rip off a quote like that at 91 years old on the fly,
Poetry?
are you kidding me?
I think it's
Tremendous.
the only time anyone has ever just recited a poem
Right?
on SI Now. It took us over 1,000
Took a
episodes.
91-year-old
We finally
coach to
got
do it,
there
yeah.
because of Marv Levy. I'm still just impressed. Ryan, thanks so
Very
much.
cool,
Fun
yeah.
show today. Thank you for watching SI Now. We'll be back tomorrow at 10:30 a.m. Eastern. But until then, stick with SI.com for all the latest news. And don't forget to follow us on Twitter at SI Now Live as we pull away. Goodbye, everybody.
See ya.
See you tomorrow.